Socio-political commentator Dwyer Astafan indicated in a recent commentary that some people close to Prime Minister Dr. Terence Drew profess their loyalty to his leadership, but he described some of those people as, quote, liars and underminers, end quote. According to Mr. Astafan, he will do what is within his power to stop such people, as they are doing more harm than good. And regardless of their rank or position, he said, they must be, quote, smoked out, end quote.
There are some who profess their loyalty to his leadership, but they are liars and underminers. I know what some of them are doing, and I know who is their man of business, and it isn't Dr. Drew. All of these groups, which I've mentioned, are already doing damage, and they must be stopped. Now, some of you are going to be displeased with me for saying these things, but if you are one of the liars and underminers, you know that I and other people are now on to you. And if you are not one of those liars and underminers, just an innocent bystander who is skeptical of what I'm saying, in time you will see. But I'm not waiting. I'm backing Dr. Drew and the Labour Party under his leadership, and I will do what I have to do to smoke out the liars and the underminers and the square pegs and the opportunists and the other deadweights. We need a lean and clean machine. And the final group of persons who need to step up their game are Dr. Drew's elected colleagues. They must remember that they were elected to Parliament, not to Cabinet. So they are first and foremost representatives of the people, and they must act accordingly, busy as they may be with their ministerial duties. They must never lose touch with the people on the ground. Remember, nobody forced them into candidacy. Whether as representatives or ministers, they must keep in touch with the ground and keep at the forefront of their thoughts and actions the empowerment of the people of this country, especially the small man and woman. But let me put this in perspective. These negative forces to which I've referred are not unique to the Drew administration. They exist in all parties and organizations and always did. Even in this organization and this government and this country, which has such a popular leader in Dr. Drew. And though these people may be small in number, I mean the liars and the underminers particularly, they need to be smoked out, regardless of how high up the ladder they may be positioned. Similarly, of course, for the square pegs, the opportunists, and the deadweights.
According to Astafan, keeping such persons employed in the system could be detrimental to Dr. Drew's leadership, as he gave examples of what could happen.
Can you imagine one of them bad-mouthing the young cabinet to an investor? Can you imagine one of them telling an investor who wants to build a small number of residences here for super billionaires who can do so much to help our country and our people? Can you imagine one of them telling an investor that that's not a good idea, that the country doesn't want that? Can you imagine one of them telling a big investor whose money is clean and who can create serious economic opportunity and jobs in the country that the investor's paperwork must fit into the queue, not high priority, wait its turn for months maybe before it can be addressed? These are some of the things that the liars and underminers are saying and doing. That is why they must be stopped, and that is why we are going to smoke them out. They are not going to be allowed to torpedo the efforts of Dr. Drew and the people of this country to get where we all need to be.
Astafan said he remains a strong supporter of the philosophy of the labor movement, but his loyalties are to principles and causes, not to individuals. Glenn Bart reporting for SK Newsline.
The Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency Empowerment has signed a Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with the Ministry of Agriculture, Marine Resources and Cooperatives in connection to the use of lands on the Royal Basture Valley National Park, more commonly referred to as the Aquifer, in order to host the Ministry of Agriculture's annual Open Day. The signing took place on Thursday, March 16th, among Dr. Joel Clark, Minister of Environment et al., and Samuel Duggins, Minister of Agriculture et al., and permanent secretaries in both ministries, Sharon Rattan and Miguel Fleming, at the Secretariat of the Minister responsible for Environment and Climate Action. Minister of Environment, Dr. Joel Clark, said the ministry has a mandate to protect the Royal Bastia Valley National Park, and part of that is instituting an MOU. She said, quote, "Part of that is establishing its use and maintaining the integrity and protecting the biodiversity and water reserves at the park. Hence, any use should rightfully be governed by a MOU which outlines what can and cannot be done in the Royal Bastia Valley, even if it is the same government or related ministry." End quote. Primarily, the MOU ensures that there must be adequate garbage receptacles, in addition to not allowing waste fertilizers, wastewater, or sewage to be leaked into the aquifer. Meanwhile, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Environment, Sharon Rattan, said the site has been deemed critical to the welfare of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. Therefore, the water source has to be protected. She said the Ministry of Environment has recognized the value of the lands of the national park and has sought to develop these lands in a manner that provides for sustainable use of them without harming the aquifer. The 2023 Agriculture Open Day will be held from April 27th to the 28th, while the MOU is effective until the 30th of April 2023. I'm Andre Huey for SKN Newsline.
It's beautiful. He took one look at you and the angels started singing.
Another wonderful day.
What would you say about staying here for a few months or like a year, just so that we can be together again and just live and love and laugh and have fun and breathe?
Why are you hiding out on a little Caribbean island, singing in a beach bar?
When I came here, I was at peace, and I never left.
This is the beating heart of Nevis. This is what grounds me, what feeds my soul. It's where I found myself.
I hope your life here will be full of joy. Love this island, my son. She will give you more than you can imagine.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
Online radio has never been this great. It's Voice of the Caribbean Radio at voiceofthecaribbean.net. Tune into Voice of the Caribbean Radio for great Caribbean programs, news, entertainment, sports, and current affairs. Wake up each morning and be inspired with One Day at a Time with Kim Huey. Stay abreast with news across the Caribbean and internationally with the Caribbean News Hour, and be entertained with shows like Reggaeville, Caribbean Classics, and Jive Music Show. Visit our website, download our Android mobile app, or listen us on TuneIn Radio. There is so much more on Voice of the Caribbean Radio, reaching the Caribbean and beyond. Check website or app for program schedule.
The situation with correspondent banking in the Eastern Caribbean has improved, said Timothy Antoine, Governor of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Correspondent banking institutions enable cross-border financial transactions or payments to occur, but such banks were being placed under pressure in countries such as the United States, with new penalties on breaches of money laundering and terrorism. To reduce their risk, some correspondent banks ceased doing business with Caribbean-based commercial banks. For St. Kitts and Nevis, the consolidation of banks seemed to have helped, as Governor Antoine recently explained.
So the situation has stabilized for the most part. And part of that is the truth. The truth is that with the consolidation in the banking sector, with the purchase of the Canadian operations by our indigenous banks, Scotia, RBC, and now, of course, there's discussion about FCIB, our indigenous banks have actually become larger. So if you think of Bank of Nevis, for example, it's now $1 billion bank, 5 billion or whatever the size is. So they have become more attractive for the correspondent banks. So that pressure has eased. So just to say, stabilized, but we remain very watchful with respect to correspondent banks. They're very important for what we do. Trade, business, and what are the concerns that the financial community has? They're concerned about money laundering. They're concerned about terrorist financing. They're concerned about proliferation financing. They're concerned about fraud. They're concerned about tax evasion. These are some of the risks that are presenting or they are concerned about. Have to be responsible, and we are. So we take steps at great cost, to protect our financial systems. And not just the ones here in the currency union, but the global financial system of which we are part. So that work will never end. It's a constant attention to detail with respect to the banking system and our engagement with the correspondent banks. But in some, stabilize, and we remain very vigilant.
Glenn Bart reporting for SK Newsline.
Press freedom and the exodus of workers from the media industry in the Caribbean were among some of the common topics discussed at the recently held biennial of the Association of Caribbean Media Workers, the ACM, held in Guyana recently. Second Vice President of the Media Association of St. Kitts and Nevis, Jermaine Abel, represented the association at the biennial held on Sunday and provided some insight into the discussions.
Like I said, COVID was one of the dominant factors throughout the region. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we would have seen a lot of newsrooms either downsized or, more specifically, at this point in time, there were salary cuts to a number of reporters. Training, for example, is another issue that has warranted our good colleagues in St. Lucia raised the issue about how best they can get more persons to be involved in the day-to-day runnings of media, because they have challenges in getting media workers to actually come together. You had the issue, and this is a critical issue that drew a consensus at the AGM, was the fact that a lot of media workers at this point in time are actually leaving to take up corporate communication roles. And we've been seeing that more specifically in a lot of the larger territories, not specifically in St. Kitts and Nevis, but in the larger territories. What specifically is causing that? What's the driving force behind media workers actually leaving their respective organizations to take up corporate communication roles? And is it a case that working conditions are not properly adhered to, or not properly being met for them to function? Is it that the salaries are not competitive enough to make them want to return?
The biennial, Mr. Abel said, gives St. Kitts and Nevis the opportunity to get regional representation.
Biennial actually gave us as an association, and by extension St. Kitts and Nevis, the opportunity to be represented at the regional level after a number of years. Yes, we had a focal point, but at the end of it, what we wanted to do as an association was have a seat at the table. We had two representatives who were nominated, and those representatives, what we wanted to do by nominating those representatives was have somebody, or at least qualify somebody, to sit on the executive, where we can be a decision maker, where we can guide decisions and policies, going forward. And even though both of them were not nominated and were not elected, at least we have one representative on the association who can put forward recommendations to the broader body, the broader executive, who can put forward policy decisions, recommendations from St. Kitts and Nevis, and also lobby on behalf of St. Kitts and Nevis and the media fraternity in St. Kitts and Nevis, while at the same point being able to raise our issues and concerns at the regional and international levels.
Some 22 persons from 12 regional associations and focal points attended the ACM's 11th Biennial General Assembly, where country reports were tabled and discussed. 2 resolutions were tabled. One resolution was referred to a special meeting of the ACM, while the other was passed to widen geographical representation. A new ACM executive was also elected. Andre Huey, SKN Newsline.
It's beautiful. He took one look at you and the angels started singing.
Another wonderful day.
What would you say about staying here for a few months or like a year, just so that we can be together again and just live and love and laugh and have fun and breathe?
Why are you hiding out on a little Caribbean island, singing in a beach bar?
When I came here, I was at peace, and I never left.
This is the beating heart of Nevis. This is what grounds me, what feeds my soul. It's where I found myself.
I hope your life here will be full of joy. Love this island, my son. She will give you more than you can imagine.
The SKN Newsline website now offers you more news. Log on to www.sknnewsline.com for local, regional, and international news. You can also watch the latest newscast and keep abreast with news in sports, all from sknnewsline.com. That's www.sknnewsline.com. News at your fingertips.
Online radio has never been this great. It's Voice of the Caribbean Radio at voiceofthecaribbean.net. Tune into Voice of the Caribbean Radio for great Caribbean programs, news, entertainment, sports, and current affairs. Wake up each morning and be inspired with One Day at a Time with Kim Huey. Stay abreast with news across the Caribbean and internationally with the Caribbean News Hour, and be entertained with shows like Reggaeville, Caribbean Classics, and Jive Music Show. Visit our website, download our Android mobile app, or listen us on TuneIn Radio. There is so much more on Voice of the Caribbean Radio, reaching the Caribbean and beyond. Check website or app for program schedule.
Comments from Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Scarrett in Roseau, which are certain to reverberate around the sub-regional capitals and beyond.
You're going to need a construct like Leon. And that's why I want to thank the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda for his heroic efforts in at least having a couple of the planes flying and providing the service, albeit not to the original level that we are accustomed to.
Prime Minister Scarrett calls the transportation woes a regional emergency. He says he was criticized when his administration took the decision to invest in LIAT 1974, but he says he cautioned his critics that LIAT's services are crucial to the region. He therefore has this view about how to address the challenges of regional transportation.
I do not believe that there's any other entity that can reasonably be expected to replace the functions of LIAT in the region. And government's investments in air transportation in the region cannot be replaced by private sector investments only. The governments must invest in intra-regional travel.
He says that's because intra-regional travel is a public good and private entities will only fly routes which are commercially viable. But will his government put its money where its mouth is?
This is affecting all of us so badly. You understand? And our economy is in a dramatic way that since the departure of LIAT from the regional scene. Okay, and I'm saying that Dominica is prepared to, as we've met, and we're prepared to play our part financially. But you absolutely need a construct like LIAT that will be complemented by the private sector airlines to give you the kind of service that you really need in these islands.
The comments from Prime Minister Scarrett are almost a replica of what Prime Minister Brown told ABS News in a recent interview.
I'm of the view that the OECS sub-region in Barbados should have a public sector entity to form the core of regional transportation, and that airline, whatever it is called, could be supplemented by the private carriers. One of the risks that countries in the region run by relying almost extensively on private sector entities is that they will not operate on profitable routes. And if they do so, it will be at an extortionate cost.
So two prime ministers on one accord on the way forward. Can they get more buy-in from their other sub-regional colleagues? And would this consensus translate into tangible investments? Or will turbulence continue to affect regional transportation?
The absence of new taxes featured in the analysis of Deloitte's 2023 budget review, and they see the Prime Minister's main focus was unlocking growth. The creation of the National Growth Council, Fiscal Council, and National Strategic Council were mentioned. The agency also noted there was no mention of the current pandemic contribution levy, which is set to end on March 31st. Pensioners' tax relief through personal income tax allowance from $40,000 to $45,000 was highlighted. And Deloitte also did a sample calculation to show how their spending power increased. Other areas highlighted were the transfer pricing legislation, new regulatory frameworks such as the new 2022 customs tariff, business surveys, re-registration of the warehouse and duty-free shopping sectors. They believe these measures will allow the Barbados government to monitor, audit, and assess contributions to the economy from this concession. KPMG, in addressing mission transformation, took notice of some key snapshots, such as the $2.8 billion in foreign reserves, the 8.5% inflation, 10% GDP growth, the fiscal surplus of $50.3 million, and Barbados's B rating. The 28-page document divided the budget into themes and gave their viewpoints on them. In the area of economic and fiscal measures, they looked at the $25,000 loan to postal workers for electric vehicles, as well as the $3 million low-interest revolving fund through fund access for public service vehicles to get electric or hybrid vehicles. KPMG sees this as reducing costs to postal workers and providing favorable costs of funding for PSVs. In the area of the film industry, which is getting a 25% transferable tax credit on eligible expenses, the agency believes it has the potential to create growth in another productive sector and also create employment. PwC, in its 23-page analysis, took a different approach to mission transformation, saying it contained a broad range of initiatives focused on economic growth and investment opportunities. One of the areas they highlighted is the global minimum corporate tax, which the Prime Minister indicated she would revisit within 6 months. PwC believes that with the OECD having released its final guidelines for how countries can bring the new global minimum corporate tax, and they believe a number of issues have to be addressed to find a suitable framework for Barbados, which will still make us an attractive place to do global business. PwC also looked at the training on offer to public servants and the many infrastructural projects in the tourism sector. They see the budget, which is encouraging Barbadians to work to a future together, as one where the strategic goals need to be further detailed and developed before the implementation stage. Wendy Burke, CBC News.
Dozens of rescue teams are working round the clock to reach 10 miners trapped underground since Tuesday. The operation is challenging because workers are about 900 meters below and the mine is connected to 5 others. 2 miners were rescued earlier.
At around 8:15 p.m. we heard a strong blast and then it triggered as if it were an earthquake. At that moment, we left and we saw the mine entries ejecting smoke and dust.
The explosion at this coal mine in central Colombia is being blamed on a buildup of methane gas. Ambulances and families of the trapped miners have surrounded the accident site in Suta Tausa.
I don't think my son is alive. My heart says he isn't. I wish he is, but I don't think so. I don't think he's in this world because after a blast, that's difficult. Only a miracle.
At least 130,000 people make a living from mining in Colombia, and unions for a long time have been calling on the government to improve working conditions. Kulsum Sharif, Al Jazeera.
The United States has released pictures of what it claims is the incident between a US drone and a Russian jet. In these pictures, you can see what is claimed to be the Russian Su-27 jet approaching the drone. The Russian jet then begins to release fuel as it passes. It then flies over the top of the drone. The Russian jet then repeats this pass, and the pictures have been released by the US Air Force. Well, Russia has denied the accusations from the US that its jets acted recklessly in this incident on Tuesday over the Black Sea. James Landale, our correspondent, is in Kiev. James, very interesting to see these pictures. What do they tell us?
Well, you've got to remember this is just an edited version of what apparently happened. The Americans say that this incident lasted for over half an hour. They've released just about 40 seconds of the footage that they've got. And essentially the Americans are doing this in part to support their version of events because it's been challenged by the Russians. The Russian says there was no contact between their aircraft and the US drone. What these pictures seem to suggest is that there was some kind of contact because you see a perfectly working propeller, and then at the end of the footage you see a bent propeller. So as you say, the Americans admit that it has been edited, but not the order of events that show these two aircraft spraying apparently fuel over the drone, and then at the beginning you see, as I say, a propeller that's working. At the end of the footage you see a propeller, one of which is distinctly bent.
And just to explain, why is fuel being sprayed?
Well, a very, very good question. All the experts who have studied these kinds of events, it's called coercive signaling. The Russians do a lot of it. When their aircraft come very close to other Allied aircraft, they try and disrupt its flight in some way. They come close, they fly very in front of it, underneath it, etc. Spraying fuel seems to be a new one on the experts. On some seems to suggest that it's an attempt to blind the drone, to disrupt its sensors and its cameras. Others suggest that they say it's such a dangerous act to pour fuel over to a fast aircraft full of electronics, full of moving parts, that it potentially, was an attempt to bring it down. The jury is out on that, and at the moment, the Russians are still insisting there was no contact. They did not use any weapons against this aircraft, and that they say that the drone began to maneuver sharply, and as a result of that, it crashed into the sea.
I mean, how diplomatically worrying is all this, James? Because obviously Russia has talked about a proxy war with NATO and Russia, but this is US, Russia, a direct incident here.
Yeah, I mean, let's be frank. This is a military confrontation between two nuclear superpowers. This does not happen very often. Of course, it is a huge matter of concern. But what is interesting is that the pattern of behavior by both the United States and Russia throughout this war has been to try and avoid it spreading and becoming a wider conflict, wider than it is at the moment. And so the United States has been very fierce and very firm in its protests about what has happened, but both sides have said it is important that they continue to talk, and it's important that they try to deconflict this kind of confrontation as much as possible.
And just remind us what happened to the drone itself.
Well, the drone was brought down. It's in the sea. The speculation is that it's somewhere west of Crimea. We know the Russians have said they want to try and recover it. The American State Department spokesman, John Kirby, has suggested it might be too deep to be recoverable. The Turks have indicated that they would allow the Bosphorus Strait to be opened for US vessels if they wanted to get vessels through. Whether that happens remains to be seen. It also remains to be seen what available technology that would be useful to Russia would be still on the drone. These drones have been around for some time, but there's some suggestion that there might be, technical updates that could be of benefits to Russia if it were to recover that. But that is all speculation for now. Whether this thing can be recovered or not very much remains to be seen.
Mantab scored a huge win over Rivers of Living Water in Escanive Division 1 on Tuesday at the Virchilds playing field, crushing them 12 goals to nil. The result shot them to the top of the table, playing one more game over TGE Diabe Eagles. Scoring for Mantab, Sylvester Alexander in the 7th minute, 2 goals from Eversley Davis in the 13th and 25th minutes. The goalkeeper, Shamar Kananier, scored a penalty in the 35th minute. Elroy Carey scored 2 goals in the 37th and 59th minutes. Shaheem Alexander scored in the 41st minute. Jaquan Liebert in the 47th minute. Tyrese Jeffrey in the 52nd minute. Wakamba Warner in the 55th minute. Javier Carey in the 64th minute. And Kinston Alford in the 67th minute. Rivers played with 10 men for part of the second half after Josh Kelly was sent off for denying an obvious goal by handling the ball. Coach Darren Huggins of Mantab said he was expecting the win, but not the goal tally.
I didn't expect so much goal, and the guys them had more chances. I wish the scoreline could have been way bigger to outscore everybody in the league. Well, in this division, goal defense don't play a lot. So in order to be the first team, goal defense play a lot. So you got to pour away with chances and get as much goals as possible because goal defense come down in the end.
For Ricky Tyson, captain of Rivers, the team has been performing poorly because of the unavailability of some of their players.
We still haven't found a proper 11 to start with. I mean, today we started the game with 10 players. And honestly, it was like 14 against 10. And then we got a red card kind of late in the game, and that made it even tougher for us. So we just got to get our players back, and hopefully we can start moving from there.
How soon do you anticipate that, the team will get stable and you'll get the players that you need?
I can't say how soon. Some of the players are out injured, some have to work, so it's a kind of iffy thing. So we just have to try and work on boosting the squad, try to get numbers, so we could at least have 11 starting.
Meanwhile, Newton Ground registered a shock win over KFC Trinity Challengers United, 4 goals to 2, also played in Virchilds. Scoring for Challengers, Donnell Borin in the 33rd minute and Jody Walters from the penalty spot in the 58th minute. Goal scorers for Newton Ground, Lavorne Edinburgh in the 45th minute, DeLandre Tyson scoring 2 goals in the 62nd and 83rd minutes, and Kevin Scarborough in the 90th minute. Division 1 action continued also on the weekend with a 2-0 victory for TGE Diabe Eagles over Hard Times United. Scoring for Diabe, Ronaldo Benjamin in the 11th minute and Jason Phipps in the 56th minute. Alan Ward of Hard Times was sent off in the 68th minute with a red card for offensive, abusive and insulting language. Coach of Diabe, Kalia Huggins, said she expected her team to score more goals.
So today's game went pretty well. I expected more goal, but the sun was a bit hot. We're just going to go back to the drawing board, more training, working on our weak areas, and for next game we'll be good.
Captain of Hard Times, Kylan Liebert, said despite the loss, his team is gradually finding its way.
They had a few clear-cut chances. Keeper did well, but with a little more work, I think we're going to get there.
What is about the team that you probably need to fix? I mean, you're getting better results, or you're just not getting the win?
Well, in football, you have to have a little luck. Apparently today we didn't have enough luck, but we're going to work. We're going to go into training. We're going to work on our shooting drills. Shooting is very important. You can't score. You can't win games unless you score. So go into training, do our shooting drills, and hopefully next game we do what we have to do.
The Escanive Division 1 continues on Thursday with matches in Kenya.
Welcome to the SKN Newsline Weather Report. I am Janil Boone. Here is a look at the forecast for St. Kitts and Nevis. For a more detailed weather report, visit our website at www.sknnewsline.com.